I'd always thought being stationed on a remote research outpost with an alien roommate was my ticket to a good story, maybe something I could sell back home. But I hadn't signed up for this. My roommate Zarnak was, shall we say, a bit different. A tall, grayish being with 3 distinct eyes that seemed to blink in random order, Zarnak belonged to the Mari, a species known for being serious and secretive, especially around mating season. The thing is, mating season had always sounded like a background detail, not a feature of my life. But right now, I was seeing firsthand that it was a big deal, all caps. Zarnak had been acting out all day, more than usual. First, he stared at the wall for an hour, murmuring in low tones. Then he did a sweeping gesture across our shared space, pausing to stare at me like I'd missed some silent instruction. You good, Zarnak? I asked, feeling the usual pang of confusion I got whenever I tried to decode alien behavior. His eyes blinked in what I assumed was contemplation. It is the time of bonding, a sacred period for my kind, he replied in his usual monotone, which made everything sound vaguely threatening. Right. Time of bonding, I echoed, feeling slightly more out of my depth than usual. And that's special? His gaze sharpened, all 3 eyes focusing on me with what I hoped wasn't too much intent. Special indeed. We are in mating season. My stomach did a flip. Like mating? You and me? He tilted his head, which didn't reassure me at all. You misunderstand. It is not mating, as humans conceive of it. We call it so, but it is a time for establishing one's bonded. An individual who becomes indispensable. Oh, okay. I nodded as if that cleared everything up. Only it didn't. But Zarnak wasn't done. He placed a long, spindly hand on what I guessed might be his chest. The bonded must share all things. Right. So, just to be super clear, this doesn't involve any physical stuff, does it? Zarnak gave me what I thought might be an eye roll, though it looked more like his top I just lost interest. You ask unnecessary questions. Not very comforting. I went to the kitchenette to give myself a minute to breathe, or, let's face it, panic. Bonded? Sharing? Indispensable? This was more than I'd ever wanted to know about alien mating seasons. And the way Zarnak was staring didn't make it any better. Zarnak followed, keeping a careful, almost reverent distance. When I reached for the coffee tin, he hissed sharply, which, I'm told, is a friendly Mari warning. Not now. You will need other sustenance. Oh, so coffee's off the menu? This, he said, lifting a jar of something that looked vaguely gelatinous, is essential. Shared sustenance, critical for bonding. I took a deep breath. So we bond over food? Yes. Zarnak watched me carefully as he placed a small dollop of the jelly onto a leaf. Consume this with me, and we will be aligned. Aligned. I tried not to cringe, hoping he didn't notice my apprehension. Then again, considering Mari were apparently dense about human social cues, he probably thought my grimace was a sign of approval. I took a hesitant bite, feeling the strange taste, like expired yogurt mixed with seaweed, spread across my tongue. Zarnak gave me a look of what I could only interpret as pride. Very good, he said, sounding almost fond. This will bring us closer. I swallowed, forcing a smile. Closer. Right. Zarnak leaned in a little, and his top eye blinked just once. Do you feel it? Feel what? The connection. Sure. Yeah. I feel connected. Super connected. If Zarnak was disappointed, he hid it well. Instead, he stood straighter, almost grandly, like he'd achieved some milestone. This is the first step in our bonding ritual. Oh, there's more? He nodded. There will be exchanges of thought, further alignment of purpose. And, at the height of our bonding, we will understand one another completely. A cold bead of sweat trickled down my neck. Right, so, what happens at the, height? Zarnak tilted his head again, a gesture I was beginning to read as deeply ominous. Full openness. Shared essence. As the season dictates. That sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know what shared essence meant, but I was pretty sure I wasn't ready to find out. So, is there a way to, speed this up? Maybe skip straight to the bonding part, without the, essence? Zarnak looked almost offended. This is not a process to be rushed. The Mari bonding is delicate. I nodded quickly, forcing another tight smile. Right. Of course. I respect delicate. He observed me a moment longer, then gave a sharp nod. I will meditate on our alignment. As he turned to resume his quiet chanting against the wall, I could only stare at his back in a blend of horror and reluctant fascination. So, this was my life now, bonding with an alien who could barely explain what it meant and didn't seem inclined to give any straight answers. I retreated to my corner of the room, wondering if I'd survive this mating season without losing my mind. And yet, there was a strange sense of calm. Maybe Zarnak's intense rituals were affecting me after all, or maybe it was the bizarre thrill of realizing I was taking part in something utterly alien. The days started to blur together, a mix of alien rituals and whatever it took to survive the drudgery of a lockdown outpost. Zarnak's mating season behavior, though supposedly non-romantic, kept me on edge. He was serious about this bonding business, his watchful gaze following me like I was his new, strange hobby. Our supplies were dwindling, mostly because Zarnak's food stocks were different from mine. When I made coffee again, he glanced at the mug like it was offensive. Apparently, the Mari believe caffeine clouds the bonding process. But we were down to bare essentials. To Zarnak, that meant gelatinous alien nutrition gels he graciously offered to share, though I couldn't quite figure out if they were meant as a favor or a test of my bonding dedication. Every time he handed me a meal, he looked at me expectantly, his third eye unblinking. I choked down each bite, trying not to grimace. You seem resistant to the offerings, Zarnak observed one day, his voice a touch too clinical. Oh no! Love it, I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Big fan of gelatin. He squinted at me, unconvinced. Your tone does not align with the sentiment. Perhaps you feel your essence is compromised? Not at all. I mean, not exactly. I cleared my throat. Maybe it's just that humans don't bond with food. He seemed intrigued, his eyes blinking in sequence. Fascinating. You must then enlighten me on human bonding rituals. I suddenly felt like I was trapped in an interspecies cultural exchange seminar. Well, humans bond over shared experiences. Talking, humor, stuff like that. Food too, sure, but I don't think humans bond like Mari. Zarnak seemed deep in thought, his hands folded over his chest. Interesting. We Mari strive for synergy. To reach alignment of body, mind, and purpose. Purpose? I echoed, a bit wary. What's the purpose? He leaned in as if about to impart a universal truth. To ensure mutual survival and enhance life's understanding. It is, as you would say, a profound commitment. Oh. So it's kind of like friendship? Zarnak's eyes widened, almost offended. Hardly. Friendship implies a mere casual arrangement. Bonding is a state beyond friendship. Got it. So, like a really intense friendship? He hesitated, his gaze thoughtful. Perhaps. But your human term is insufficient. I tried to hold in a laugh. Zarnak, with his precise words and elaborate traditions, was intense about everything. And yet, I was actually starting to respect it. There was something strangely comforting about his commitment. We'd even started to find a sort of routine in our strange coexistence. I'd wake up to Zarnak sitting in a trance, muttering his daily alignment chants against the wall. Eventually, I started joining in, partly out of boredom and partly out of curiosity. Zarnak had this ritual down to a science, every phrase whispered with reverence, every movement deliberate. What does all this mean? I asked him once, nodding at the chant he kept repeating. He paused, considering. It is a way to synchronize our essences. To ensure we both exist in unity. Unity. Sure. I still couldn't shake the feeling that this bonding was about to take a turn, though Zarnak was playing it all straight. At least he wasn't trying anything overt. For all his quirks, Zarnak was surprisingly respectful. The weirdest part, though, was that we were genuinely running out of human food supplies. At one point, all I had left was a protein bar, and Zarnak eyed it with distaste, his head tilted in a way I'd come to recognize as judgment. "Your sustenance is lacking," he remarked. "It's called survival food," I replied, shrugging. "But I don't see you offering alternatives." Without a word, he retrieved his alien jelly and spread a generous glob onto my bar, offering it with what I assumed was a Mari equivalent of pride. I took a deep breath, deciding to just go for it. The taste was somehow worse, though Zarnak seemed delighted at my apparent sacrifice for the bond. "There is courage in your willingness," he said approvingly, his voice oddly soft. "Yeah, well, I'm just trying to survive," I muttered, barely getting the words out as I forced down the weird texture. Still, the hint of admiration in his tone almost made it worth it. As we worked through our meager supplies, we started sharing bits of our stories. Zarnak's life was more ordered than mine, almost mechanical. I learned that he'd studied bonding techniques as part of Mari's social customs, though he never attempted a bonding with any species outside his own. When I asked him why he hadn't tried it with another Mari, his silence was telling. "Why me, then?" I finally asked, genuinely curious. He looked at me, his 3 eyes blinking slowly. "Because you are unafraid to be unconventional." "Unconventional. Right." I managed a small smile. "Guess I'll take that as a compliment." He gave a short nod. "You should." Strangely enough, that night I felt a little better about things. Sure, I was trapped on an alien outpost with a roommate whose species' customs were deeply strange to me, but there was a sense of camaraderie forming. Bonded or not, we'd developed a routine that felt oddly normal. Or at least, normal for a human and an alien sharing food that looked like fluorescent slime. The constant misunderstandings, the endless attempts to keep up with his rituals, the strange offerings. It was like navigating an interstellar obstacle course. But somewhere in the absurdity, we'd started to meet each other halfway. By the end of the day, I caught myself almost looking forward to whatever bizarre bonding step would come next. As frustrating as it was, there was a strange charm to Zarnak's intensity, his unshakable belief in these rituals. Days of bonding, chanting, and stomach-turning food experiments had become the new normal. I was actually starting to get used to Zarnak's peculiarities when a real, teeth-clenching threat came our way. It happened without warning, a screech, an impact that rattled the walls, and a thudding sound that shook the outpost floor. We both froze, our gazes snapping toward the air vent where the noise seemed to grow louder, accompanied by a scraping, slithering sound. Zarnak's eyes narrowed. "Creature," he murmured, voice tight with something I'd almost call fear. "Oh great, it's like the universe is testing our bond or something," I muttered, trying to mask my own alarm. I hadn't faced alien wildlife before, and frankly, I'd hoped to keep it that way. Without another word, Zarnak took a step in front of me, his posture rigid. "Stay close. The Mari have protocols for such encounters." "Right. Safety protocols." "Got it," I whispered, fighting to ignore the pang of panic. The creature, a blur of scales and claws, burst through the vent, screeching as it barreled toward us. It was nothing like any animal I'd seen. Long, lean, with segmented limbs that skittered across the floor like it was half spider, half snake. I barely had time to register it before Zarnak shifted, raising his arms in a stance I assumed was his version of defense. With one swift movement, Zarnak pulled me behind him, almost knocking me off balance. I was suddenly sandwiched between his arm and the wall, trapped in a position that felt far too intimate for an alien bonding ritual. His body was tense, one hand lightly gripping my shoulder, which might have been comforting if not for the fact that it felt like he'd forgotten how fragile human bones were. The creature hissed, advancing, and I could feel Zarnak's breathing, steady, calm, like he was in a trance. "Stay silent," Our essence must be focused, he whispered, his voice low. Yeah, focusing all the essence here, I muttered back, trying to angle myself enough to see the creature without shoving Zarnak out of the way. The creature lunged, its fangs glistening. Zarnak blocked it with a strange, sharp motion, using his arm to deflect the beast's face as he dodged. He looked like he was dancing, a weird, alien dance of defense that seemed to draw the creature's attention away from me. His moves were smooth, precise, like he'd practiced them 100 times, while I clung to the wall, trying not to panic. But then the creature shifted its focus, its alien eyes landing on me with unsettling intent. Without thinking, I grabbed the closest thing, a stray piece of equipment, a heavy metal rod, and took a swing. The rod connected with a solid crack, sending the creature skittering back with a shriek. I didn't know if I'd actually heard it, but the creature seemed momentarily stunned. Zarnak looked back at me, his expression somewhere between surprise and admiration. You responded with swift vigor. Survival instinct, I replied, trying not to let on that I'd almost dropped the rod in shock. Humans can be resourceful in a pinch. The creature gathered itself, rearing up for another strike. Zarnak and I exchanged a quick glance, a shared understanding that, in this moment, we were a team, whatever strange rituals he'd subjected me to. He moved to the creature's left, while I circled around to the right. As the creature lunged, Zarnak raised his arm in an arc, deflecting it again. I saw my chance and swung the rod with all my might, connecting with the creature's exposed side. It screeched and scuttled back, finally retreating through the vent it had come from. We stood there in stunned silence, both of us catching our breath. For a second, I felt a rush of accomplishment, the adrenaline making me dizzy. Zarnak watched me, his eyes brighter than usual, an approving look that bordered on something, almost proud. That was impressive, he said, his tone unusually soft. Thanks, I said, offering him a shaky grin. Guess we're not such a bad team. Zarnak tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps this is evidence of our synergy. Synergy, huh? I gave a short laugh. Yeah. That sounds about right. He didn't move, just kept watching me with an intensity that made me feel oddly self-conscious. Our essence was in alignment, he said, almost to himself, like he was working through a profound realization. This moment will strengthen our bond. Right. Strengthening the bond. I tried to sound casual, but I couldn't help the warm feeling creeping into my chest. For all his strange habits, Zarnak was genuinely trying, and despite myself, I was starting to appreciate it. In a way, that encounter felt like a turning point. It was as though we'd been through some unspoken rite of passage together. After that, Zarnak seemed more relaxed around me, though relaxed for him meant slightly less formal. He'd still mutter his chants every morning and follow his weird rituals, but there was a sense of ease between us now, a kind of silent understanding. It didn't mean he stopped with the intense bonding rituals, though. If anything, his enthusiasm seemed to increase. Now every shared meal, every passing moment, became an opportunity for deeper understanding. At first, I found it exhausting, trying to keep up with his endless questions and philosophical musings on the nature of connection. But the more time we spent together, the more I started to feel grateful. For the first time, the outpost felt less like a trap and more like a home. It was strange, but I was actually beginning to look forward to the next bonding ritual, the next shared meal, the next odd conversation. Zarnak's dedication, his curiosity, his commitment to this bond, it was all starting to grow on me. Maybe there was something to this whole bonding process after all. Things had settled down after the creature incident, but Zarnak had become more intense about the bonding rituals. He seemed convinced our brush with danger had created a critical alignment. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I got the sense it was important to him. To me, it just meant more of the same strange foods, shared chanting sessions, and lengthy discussions about what he called interconnected essences. One morning, after a quiet breakfast of the usual alien jelly and whatever scraps were left in our supplies, Zarnak looked at me with a serious expression, all three eyes focused. It is time for the final ritual, he announced. I hesitated. Final ritual? He nodded. Our bond has reached a stage where we must complete the final step. Only then can we truly be aligned. Right, I said slowly, trying to keep my tone neutral. And what does this final step involve, exactly? He considered this for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. The exchange of personal essences. A merging of sorts. I gulped. Merging? It is symbolic, he assured me. You need not fear. Oh, I'm not scared, I said, though my pulse was racing a bit. Just curious. Zarnak began arranging some strange alien stones and bowls in a circle on the floor. Each stone emitted a faint glow, casting soft, colored light across the room. It felt like some ancient, intergalactic ceremony was about to take place, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being in over my head. He gestured for me to sit opposite him, on the other side of the circle. As I sat down, I felt an unexpected sense of calm settle over me. Maybe it was the low, rhythmic hum he'd started chanting, or maybe it was the gentle glow of the stones, but something about the setup was peaceful. We must synchronize our breath, he said, closing his eyes. I followed his lead, matching his slow inhales and exhales. After a few moments, my breathing fell into sync with his, and I found myself relaxing even more. Now we must express our mutual understanding, he murmured. Our thoughts, our reflections on our shared time. I blinked. You mean like talk about what we've been through? Yes. To honor the journey, he said, his voice soft. I took a deep breath, trying to figure out where to start. Well, this whole bonding thing wasn't exactly what I expected. Honestly, when I first heard mating season, I thought, well, something a lot different. Zarnak gave a rare smile. Yes. Humans seem to focus on physical interpretations. I laughed. Can you blame us? Anyway, I wasn't sure about all the rituals at first. But I think I get it now. His eyes met mine, and there was a warmth in his gaze that was surprisingly familiar. And I, too, have come to understand much about humans. Your resilience. Your adaptability. Your loyalty. I couldn't help but smile. Guess we're not so different, after all. The room was quiet as we sat in the glow of the stones, breathing in sync, an unspoken sense of peace filling the space between us. For the first time, the outpost felt like home, and Zarnak didn't feel like a strange, inscrutable alien. He felt like a friend. Or maybe something more. Are we bonded now? I asked after a few moments. Zarnak's gaze softened. Yes. Our essences are intertwined. The words felt profound, and I didn't need to understand all the Mari customs to know this was a moment we'd both remember. We sat there in silence, letting the weight of our bond sink in. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt complete. After a while, Zarnak rose, his usual stern demeanor back in place, though there was a gentleness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. You will always have a place with my kind, he said quietly. You are one of us now. I nodded, feeling an unexpected tightness in my chest. And you, well, I'm pretty sure you'd fit right in with humans. He tilted his head thoughtfully. I believe I would like that. As the ceremony ended, the lights faded, and everything returned to normal. But somehow, everything felt different. For all his quirks, his intensity, and his rituals, Zarnak had become more than just a roommate. He was a part of me now, in a way that words couldn't fully capture. And as strange as it sounded, I knew that no matter what happened next, I'd always be grateful for the time I'd spent trapped in the outpost with my alien roommate.